real quickly, talk about this, the disparate coverage that we have seen, especially when it comes to the tragedy in Highland Park, but also the tragedy that happened pretty much at the same time in Chicago proper due to gun violence.
Yeah, I can say as somebody, just from Parkland, and having been to so many communities, including the south and west side of Chicago, working with people on the ground there and just listening to what they go through on a daily basis, people like Alex King and so many others that are young people and older people too, that have been working on this issue. Unfortunately, there is a pretty strong discrepancy in how gun violence is covered in communities that look like Parkland versus many communities that are less resources, and communities of color especially that are way more impacted by gun violence on a daily basis than most white communities. And I think the thing that I've thought about a lot since Parkland isn't just the importance of gun laws, but also the importance of resources and talking about injustice that communities face when we talk about gun violence. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that Parkland should not have had the support that we did with all the therapists and, all the outpouring of support that we got. It's to say that every community, no matter whether or not it looks like Parkland, should have that kind of support, because these kids are dying every day in many communities. We have mass shootings occurring every single day in our country in the form of these individual shootings that do not get covered.
And one of the things that's most impressed me about you and your former fellow students at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, from the moment that Parkland happened, you, in addition to focusing in on your own trauma and tragedy, you put the spotlight on other communities, particularly in Chicago, at the same time telling people you need to worry and focus on those folks too. I want to switch gears, David, because you sent out a tweet that really shook me, because I too am starting to worry about this same thing. You tweeted that you're deeply worried that we could be close to a coordinated mass terrorist attack in the United States by young, heavily armed white nationalists. Explain why you're concerned by this.
Yeah, there was actually a recent article that I would advise people even more to read about, that was in the Washington Post, where they interviewed an expert on the beginning of what causes civil wars and the lead up to civil wars and insurgencies. And the thing that I'm deeply concerned about is, the fact that many of these mass shooters have similar intentions, if not almost the exact same intentions, of building a white and male-dominated white ethnic state in our country. What scares me is that we've seen these shooters time and time again, like the shooter at my high school, have these incredibly xenophobic ideals, these hateful, racist ideals over and over again. And it's not just in Parkland, it's also in Buffalo. It's also, in many of these other places. And what concerns me is that although, many of these outlets, such as Fox News, for example, and Donald Trump, may not be calling for violence directly, we know from QAnon that they don't necessarily need to be, because many people are out there looking for, quote unquote, signs of what they need to be looking for from our leaders in order to indicate what they actually want to happen, but they feel like they can't say in front of the media. And what we need people to do is realize, even if you're not calling for violence, if mass shooters are saying in their manifestos basically the same thing that you're saying about the white race being replaced in this ridiculous white nationalist propaganda that is being spread across our country right now and fed into the mainstream, if you're saying that same thing that those mass shooters are saying, maybe you shouldn't be saying that thing in the first place. And we need to realize that, again, hatred is not a mental illness. I can't stand it when there are these terrorist attacks that are happening across the United States by these white nationalists, and we repeatedly act like hatred is a mental illness. Racism is not a mental illness. Racism is learned. Hatred is learned. Our country needs to realize that mental illness does have a role in addressing gun deaths. But that's only in regards to the 2/3 of gun deaths that are suicides. What's not going to help to reduce gun deaths, though, is stigmatizing it and making people think the only time we should be talking about mental illness is when there's a white nationalist mass shooter that goes and kills people, like the 17 students and educators that the white nationalist mass shooter at my high school killed.